Let's now talk about the blessings of suffering. There are countless blessings of suffering that we can reap, learn, and benefit from suffering, and I will discuss a handful of them. First and foremost, suffering reveals and displays the glory of God in our lives. And I'll give you some scriptural references, and I will explain what I mean by that. In the story of Lazarus, John chapter 11, verse 4, when Jesus heard that, he said, "This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be" what? Glorified through it. And in the passage of the man born blind in John chapter 9, verses 2 and 3, his disciples asked him, saying, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him." Now, some people may ask and say, well, why did God inflict death upon Lazarus? And why did he inflict blindness upon this blind man? It's not their fault. Was he doing this just so that he can, forgive me to say that, show off and display his glory? That just seems a little unfair for them. But that is not the case. St. Cyril of Alexandria, in his commentary on the Gospel of John chapter 7, he explains. He says, Jesus saw with his foreknowledge, he saw the future, and he knew that in the end, I'm quoting St. Cyril, Jesus saw in the end Lazarus' illness and death would be for the glory of God. This is not to say that the sickness came on Lazarus so that God should be glorified, but he saw that in the end his illness and death would be for the glory of God. He goes on to say, St. Cyril, "For it would be silly to say this, but rather, since the sickness had come upon Lazarus, Jesus foresaw the wonderful conclusion to his illness." So God didn't inflict this suffering or death, in this case, onto Lazarus, but he foresaw this, and he also foresaw that this will be used for the glory of God. St. John Chrysostom, in his homily on the Gospel of John, also said, "Did he suffer wrong for the glory of God? Tell me what he did wrong." Now he's commentating on the story of the man born blind. He goes on to say, "I assert that he even received benefit from his blindness. Not only was this suffering to display the glory of God, but even the blind man received benefit from his blindness." St. John Chrysostom goes on to say, "Because he recovered the sight of the eyes within." What did the Jews profit by their eyes? They were blinded even while they saw. For through his blindness, he recovered his sight. How wonderful is that? The evils of the present life are not evils. So neither are the good things good. Sin alone is evil, but blindness is not an evil. And that is what St. John Chrysostom said. So firstly, one of the blessings of suffering, that it displays and reveals the glory of God in our lives. And we can see, feel, and touch God's working hand in our lives when we are going through tribulations and trials. Secondly, the second blessing of suffering, it tests and refines our faith. Let me give you the scriptural references. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 7. "You have been grieved by various trials, that the genuineness of your faith, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory." Psalm 66, verse 10. For you, O God, have tested us. You have refined us as silver is refined. And lastly, James chapter 1, verses 2 and 4. Count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. And let's go back to the church fathers and see what St. John Chrysostom says. Suffering is a real bond, an encouragement to greater love, and the basis of spiritual perfection and godliness. Everywhere you see suffering being praised, everywhere it is accepted as necessary for us. For, listen to what he says, in the world there is no one who wins a trophy without suffering, who has not strengthened himself with labors and dieting and exercise and vigils and many other things like that. So suffering refines us, trains us, puts us in this mode of being purified as silver and gold. How would you be purified, tested, and refined if you did not experience any suffering? I would also add from Saint Athanasius in his festal letters, he says, because the saints saw that the divine fire would cleanse them and benefit them, they did not shrink away or shy away from it or get discouraged by trials which they faced. Rather than being hurt by what they went through, they grew and were made better, shining like gold that has been refined by fire. So the saints did not shy away or escape suffering. They welcomed suffering, knowing that this is for their purification and refinement. So trials, they reveal our faith. They test our faith by revealing our faith, whether we have it or we need to strengthen it even more. And trials solidify this faith as well. So it reveals it and it solidifies it and strengthens it. Number 3. So we said the blessings of sufferings, it manifests and reveals and displays the glory of God. It refines and tests our faith. Number 3, it strengthens our character. It gives us strength in our character. Let's look at the scriptures and what they say. Hebrews 12:11. Now, no chastening seems to be joyful for the present, but painful. Nevertheless, afterwards, it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. And you get strength by training. Romans chapter 5, verses 3 and 4. St. Paul says, we also glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope. Lastly, 2 Corinthians 4:17, St. Paul says, for our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us and in us, if I may add, a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. A lot of virtues cannot be achieved or realized without suffering. And they're developed through suffering and trials and tribulations. For example, there would be no courage without danger. There would be no perseverance without obstacles. There would be no compassion without suffering and pain. There would be no patience if there were no tribulations. There would be no character without adversity. In other words, we can sum all this up and say, if there's no pain, there'll be no gain. Fourthly, suffering helps us sympathize with others and enter into the hearts and the minds and the lives of others. One of my favorite verses in the scriptures, 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 and 5. 3 through 5. St. Paul says, "Blessed be the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort those who are in any trouble, with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. For as the sufferings of Christ abound in us, so our consolation also abounds through Christ. Now if we are afflicted, it is for your consolation and salvation, which is effective for enduring the same sufferings which we also suffer." In other words, when I am comforted, I become filled with this comfort, that I overflow comfort unto you. So I sympathize with you. I give you the comfort that I was given by the Lord. How will you get this comfort had you not endured or had you not gone through pain and suffering? Another blessing of suffering. The more you suffer, the more comfort you'll get from the Lord. And we know that by faith. And the more comfort I get, the more I become an instrument of comfort unto others. St. Theodore explains and says, "You have one deficiency, but not another. The neighbor's case is the opposite. He has another deficit, but not the one you have. So you must bear his, and he bears yours. For thus is the law of love fulfilled. I bear your trouble, and you bear my trouble. You carry my burden, and I carry your burden, and this is the law of love."